Welcome. We are promptly starting. It's now 2:30 here. 1 second, just sorting out something here. Okay, so hi, welcome everyone to Birdlife Jamaica poster launch. We are pleased to have, and well, so far a nice number of guests, and we'll have some lovely presentations, and our keynote speaker, Herb Raphael, we're pleased to have him here. If no one is familiar with the Birdlife Jamaica poster, this is now the 20th anniversary. It was first launched in 2001, November 5th, which is National Wood and Water Day. And it was an endemic bird poster, so it featured at the time over 30 Jamaican endemics. This poster was, a major funder for this poster was Herbert Raphael by way of the US Fish and Wildlife Service and International Affairs, which is a division of international conservation for Wildlife Without Borders in the Latin America and the Caribbean program. It was, at the time, it was launched at the Public Affairs Auditorium at the US Embassy. The ambassador was Sue Cobb. And well, we would have wanted to do something similar for this, but here we are in this new world and we have to make do. Hopefully going forward, we can be in person and also have our digital component at the same time. You know, we'll have all our immediate and extended family present. But that first poster there were contributions from the Gleaner, Hilton, the cement company, Shell, Jamaica, and most were sent representatives to that meeting, that launch. And that first poster was distributed mainly through schools and primary, secondary, and the libraries, combined with a teacher's guide to birds in Jamaica. And it was also accompanied by Birds of Jamaica by Downer and Sutton, and a booklet, The Birds of Jamaica, a celebration of the Jamaican Pauraque project, which was undertaken by Dr. Davis, and who was instrumental in its distribution, as the Ridge to Reef Watershed Project and other key NGOs across the island. We also sold a number of those posters through the Ecosystems Management branch at NEPA. Former President Ricardo Miller had a large stack in his office, and NEPA also regulates the hunting season. A lot of times hunters would come in, the posters would be there, and they'd see it, they'd buy it. Other persons that come in for business would let them know about the poster. Anyone who went somewhere and saw the poster and sort of asked about it, we had them there for sale at the time. Sorry, just checking something. So, special thanks to Herb again. The illustrations used on the poster are from him, and they were used in his books, and the Cape Cod Bird Club for supporting this new updated poster. There was a lag in between. I mean, most things need updating, so we're keen to update it, not to give it a little more vibrancy and to include the new edition, and to get another set introduced and distributed out to the wider public. For that initial launch, Herb was supposed to come to Jamaica and was canceled, as it was 2001. It was around the same time as 9/11, unfortunately. And all senior federal employees were grounded. On a special note, the Birdlife Jamaica board they matched the money that was given by Herb and Cape Cod Birding Club. And these new posters, after the initial distribution to schools and key partners, the intention is to sell some in order to get funds to then print more and redistribute. The aim is to get them in all schools, in all community groups, in all churches, anywhere and everywhere. But mainly we want to target the schools and the youth groups and just get the public education going. And it will be available to schools and organizations free of cost. So we're hoping that, through donations and through personal purchases, this is how we'll fund it. These new posters are extremely affordable. They're $500 each. And again, that is for personal purchases, not for the schools. And a stockpile will also be at National Environment and Planning Agency as well, as of September 1. So we're also, if our persons are also interested in having a stockpile for sale, they can contact us and let us know. It will be good to have points of purchase across the island. For anyone that is wondering why there is no 31 endemics as opposed to 30, I'm going to quickly hand over to past President Ricardo Miller to briefly speak about that, and then we will proceed. Thank you for being here, and I'm turning it over to Ricardo.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Could I have a quick indication that everyone is hearing me?
We're hearing you, Ricardo.
Great, great. Yes, so good afternoon, everyone. And I want to again welcome you to our launch of our new redesigned endemic bird poster of Jamaica. It's been exactly 20 years since our first endemic poster launch, as Damany pointed out. And on that poster, the tagline was 30 more reasons to be proud. But on our new poster, we're actually now recognizing 31 endemic birds. And the question is why? Is it a new bird just suddenly rediscovered? Well, no. The new bird that we're adding is actually the parakeet, formerly known as the olive-throated parakeet. There has been a move to have this parakeet split into two different species, the population on Jamaica being one, and the other population, which is in Central America, parts of Mexico and so forth, to be considered a separate species. Now, this push is actually being championed by one classification. So it's a matter of which classification authority we're looking at. The AOU, which is the American Ornithological Union in the US, will not actually recognize it as a separate species. It has it as a subspecies of the olive-throated parakeet, the Jamaican population, that is. However, we've been more closely aligned with the British classification, and there are actually two classifications there. There is the International Ornithological Council, which is the larger one, and there is also Birdlife International. And Birdlife International, which publishes the Handbook of the Birds of the World, has recognized that this is most likely a separate species. And so they've gone ahead and they have renamed it to the Jamaican parakeet. And the ones in Central America, they are now calling the Aztec parakeet. So now it was up to us here in Jamaica, because this is our species. Now, do we go with the BirdLife International classification? Do we go with the AOU? Do we go with the IOC? And so after a lot of debate, we're saying, hey, this is our species, this species, we want the recognition that it deserves. It's a species that is sometimes persecuted because some farmers think that, you know, it's threatening their crops and so forth. And so we took this bold leap to go ahead and say, yes, we, being Birdlife Jamaica, were formerly much closer associated with Birdlife International. And this species being ours, we actually want to recognize it. We actually created a tagline saying FIWI 31 to show that, you know, this is our species. And so by recognizing the parakeet, now the Jamaican parakeet, as our endemic species, we're giving it the recognition it deserves and hopefully the conservation effort that is well needed. And so that is the main reason why we're now and proudly saying that we have 31 endemic species on the island. Back over to you, Damany.
Thank you, Ricardo, for defending defending our decision. Or sorry, I've lost video. All right, well, so now I'm going to hand it over to Stokely, our Vice President, to share something else that we've been working on quietly with everyone, and hopefully we can appreciate this, again, another forward step of updating and refreshing things in Jamaican bird lore. We have a new logo, an updated logo, I should say. So I'm handing over to Stokely.
Good evening, everyone. Well, just to give a brief description of our logo, just a preamble to revealing what our logo is. We wanted to pay homage to the original logo from Birdlife Jamaica. So it's really an update of what the original logo was, with a new modern twist to it, a new modern looking font. And so without further ado, let's show our logo. One second here. Can anyone see that?
Yes, we are seeing a logo, okay. Continue.
So basically, the logo, again, is paying homage to the original logo. So it's a slight update to it. We retain the same Jamaican Oriole, but with the circle and the Birdlife Jamaica words a little bit more updated. So I hope everyone like it, and we look forward to using this logo in the future. And any comments, we would welcome to see what everybody thinks. Thank you.
Thank you, Stokely. Well, you can see the original, my background. So now it's more, Stokely is the graphic artist. It's a more streamlined and modern take on the classical Jamaican Oriole. And I'm actually not sure what that leaf, what branch of tree that is. But yes, so you'll be seeing that going forward on various digital and print media and other things to come. So what we have now is a review and history of publications about Jamaican birds, from Goss to Downer. And this is a lovely interview with our very dear John Fletcher, that was conducted by Mr. Damian White and filmed by Mr. Stokely Sadler. And we all would have loved to have been there for it. But again, we're here during these COVID times and we're trying to limit our interaction, especially with persons of stature. We'd like to keep him safe and sound. But without further ado, here it is. Enjoy.
Hello, good morning, John. How are you doing?
Good morning, Damien. Great. And you?
I'm doing pretty okay. Well, today we have one of the, well, I should say, #1 birders in Jamaica, that is John Fletcher. I have known this, well, I should say, wonderful person for about 20 almost years. When it comes to bird life in Jamaica, you know about John Fletcher. So today we're going to be having a little chat with John. And the first question I would ask John, could you tell us about how did you become a birder?
Quite by chance. I was living in Graham Heights at that time, and my father had had a serious illness, and I'd invited him to come and spend time while he was recuperating. So for 3 months, he sat on the veranda looking at the birds in the garden. And then every evening when I came in from work, he would say, "You saw this bird and that bird, and what are those blue ones?" I didn't know. I didn't know anything about them. So I went out and bought Professor James Bond's Birds of the West Indies, and then sat with him and we identified the birds. That got me hooked, because now there were other birds in there that I had seen and taken any interest in, and I had a book to tell me what they were. I was working in Yallis at that time, and sometimes in the late afternoon, I just felt like I wanted to be somewhere alone and silent. And I found the Yallis salt pond, and I used to drive down there, nobody around, absolute silence, but a lot of birds in that pond. So then I took the bird book with me and got interested in trying to identify all the different shorebirds, which is a problem, especially for a novice birder like me.
Yes, shorebirds can be very hard. They're very difficult to differentiate. I completely understand that.
It made me realize that the book really is what drives your interest. And if you look at the history of birding in Jamaica, we have 4 major books over the years that kind of like marker stones. The first and the starting point really is Philip Henry Goss, Birds of Jamaica, written in 1847.
Wow.
And that's our baseline. That's where we know what was there at that time. And we read Goss today, and we're reading exactly the same things that we're seeing in the tree. Then you have to come forward 100 years from that. The same James Bond book that I referred to earlier, that was published as a field guide in 1947.
Is it the same James Bond that made the James Bond movie we're talking about?
No. What happened was the guy who wrote the story about James Bond 007 had the bird book on the table, and he wanted a simple English-sounding name. And there it was, James Bond. That James Bond, the original, is a professor of ornithology.
Wow. I bet a number of people didn't know that. Wow.
So that now became the handbook for anybody who was interested in birding. anywhere in the Caribbean. It's a small book, but it has an amazing amount of information in it, and the pictures, the color pictures are quite good. Then in 1990, we made a major step forward because now we had Birds of Jamaica, a photographic field guide, a gem of a book produced by Robert Sutton, Audrey Downer, with photographs by a French photographer, Yves-Jacques Rémillet. Beautiful photographs.
I remember my first copy of that book. It's a very pretty book. Up to this day, I use it.
Yeah, well, it's been reissued in 2009 by Dr. Anne Sutton,
Yes.
Robert's widow. And the 2009 is even better.
A softer cover copy, but yes, it is even better.
Yeah.
You spoke about 4 books, and we spoke about the first 3. So what's the 4th book?
The 4th book is Birds of the West Indies by Raphael, Garrido, Wiley, and Keith. A marvelous book. It has so much information in it about the entire Caribbean. And really, it's, for anybody who's traveling in the Caribbean, it's essential. Although it's a big book, you can't carry it around in your pocket. But it's, I call it the New Testament of birding in the Caribbean.
Could you tell us about some of the founders of Birdlife Jamaica, or should I say from Goss Club to Birdlife Jamaica?
Yeah. Well, Goss stands on his own. There were a few other people in the 19th century who contributed by collecting and sending samples to museums or maybe writing papers, but it was nothing major. There was a man called W.T. March in the 1860s who collected samples of our birds and sent them to museums all over the place. There's a very interesting article by Catherine Levy in broadsheet number 96 that deals with March. Otherwise, he's almost unknown. There was Miss May Jeffrey Smith, who published Birdwatching in Jamaica in 1956. And that was based on 50 years of experience. She was a
50 years?
Yeah, she was headmistress of Westwood High School for a time. And she lived partly in St. Catherine, but most of her time in St. Anne. So she was a birder all over the country. Lady Taylor, the wife of the principal of UWI back in the 50s, she wrote a book called Introduction to the Birds of Jamaica.
Wow.
So there are other contributions as you go through. But I think the big jump was when Birds of Jamaica was first produced, 1990, Robert Sutton and Audrey Downer. Audrey is Robert's aunt. At that time, well, let's say in the 50s, 60s, 70s, Robert was almost the only active bird watcher in Jamaica over that period. He lived at Marshall's Pen virtually his whole life. But he was dedicated to bird watching and keeping records. But those records never went anywhere. Audrey was the one that drove him, and Audrey was a great organizer. She was really the person who held the Goss Bird Club together in its early years. And she knew that Robert had got all this information, so she now put the pressure on Robert. Let's put all this into a book so that everybody can get advantage of the work you have done. It was a major undertaking. I remember Audrey told me that to get the color pictures right, it was printed in Hong Kong. It had to go back to Hong Kong 9 times.
To get it right.
To get it right, because she knew the difference between, let's say, the yellow of an oriole and the yellow of a spindalis. But the printer in Hong Kong didn't. So it would come and she'd say, no, that's too orange or that's too yellow and all that. So 9 trips
Wow.
to get all of those photographs.
That's
right.
a lot of work. So other than Robert, who else you would say other founders throughout the years in the club?
Well, an important person would be Lisa Salmon. She would have joined the Bird Club very early on, but she never came into Kingston. She lived at Rocklands up near Anchovy, and she had been a birder all her life, and she was a kind of driving force in the background. And Audrey Downer joined. Audrey was actually living in Montego Bay when the Bird Club was formed in 1963. But when she moved into Kingston, she became a more active member, and eventually she became the secretary, the president, everything, because it was a small group, and somebody, especially during the 70s, somebody needed to hold it together, and that was Audrey's function. Later on, Catherine Levy became a central figure, and our president at one time, Peter Vogel from UWI, was a very important person because although he was not originally an ornithologist, he was a herpetologist. He had undergraduates, and a lot of the projects that he would find for his undergraduates would be birds.
Finally, I would want you to sum up to people who want to become members of Birdlife. Could you explain to them what is bird watching all about? Why would I want to be bird watching? Why do you have so much fun? Please explain it to us.
I think it's part of people becoming more conscious of their environment and how we are destroying that environment in so many ways just through our own ignorance. When you start looking at the environment, you begin to focus on some specific thing, and it depends upon you, your background, and so on, as to what that thing is. It may be flowers, it may be trees. In my case, it happened to be birds, and it all goes back to that time I spent with my father trying to identify the birds in the front yard. Once you get into it, you just want to know more. There is so much to learn. You begin to realize that there is stuff out there that has always been there, but you didn't know because you never looked. And for me, it has been a wonderful experience, and it has taken me to many other parts of the world, and everywhere I go, birds will be my focus because of the way it developed in Jamaica. But I even have CDs that I can play of past birding experiences. I've got a library of photographs of birds I've seen, so I still can enjoy it. And I can go back to those 4 books if I really want, if it's a day like yesterday when you can't go out, the books are there.
Wow. Thank you very much, John. And a question that I didn't ask before, but could you tell us one of your most memorable birding experience or trip?
There was an event which you will remember, 2010, September into October. There was a massive tropical storm filling up the whole Caribbean. And migrating birds that normally would have flown around Jamaica or over Jamaica couldn't. And they came bang and landed in Jamaica and spent a couple of weeks here. And we started seeing things we had never seen in Jamaica before. If anybody has their copy of the broadsheet, number 83, Our editor at that time, Vaughan Turland, who was a marvelous editor, put all the information from all the birders all over Jamaica into that edition, did a map showing where in Jamaica all of those birds were seen. That was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. I mean, there were, I think, probably 30 birds that I saw in that period that I'd never seen in Jamaica before. That doesn't happen very often.
Thank you, Leo. Wow, that's a very good chat with John. Most chats, or if not all chats with John, are very enlightening, historical, and just lovely to find out John's experiences. And one thing that didn't come up, but I think you could gather from the interview, was when birders get together and go out, we have a very good time and share some very memorable experiences. Some of our overnight trips or day trips have added components that may or may not be birds. And those, as John said, add to your appreciation of nature, and sometimes send you on new, additional or new varied paths. But so we have our key guest speaker, who I mentioned before, Herb Raphael. I already mentioned, I think, that he is the former chief of U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services Division of International Conservation. He's also the author of Birds of the West Indies and some other publications, including the sequel to that book. He has received a Lifetime Achievement Award from Birds Caribbean, where he is a former director. And in a previous interview with Birds Caribbean, he was asked what does he think the biggest challenge facing Caribbean bird conservation is. And it aligns a little with what John just said, because he pointed out, Herb, that is, that birds and nature in general are not important components of cultural values in the region. And that may be due to, as John said, you're not seeing things and appreciating things for what they are, because you're going about your life. You don't have, John had mentioned, really getting into it once he had a book to reference, and you're seeing things in the book and then you're seeing things in real life and that type of interaction. So Herb had said, if local values and attitudes and beliefs are not positive towards nature, it's inevitable that, people will neglect it, negative actions and behaviors will follow. And that many conservation programs focus on the symptoms and not the underlying problem. So once something has gone wrong, you're trying to fix it, and the focus isn't on trying to ensure that it doesn't go wrong. And of course, until this changes, we can't succeed. And while education through publications such as books and this poster and other educational material, digital and print, while they're important components, they're not the whole solution, but they're very important pieces of the puzzle. And that hopefully through constant distribution of informational materials, being ever present, it will help shape attitudes. He also had previously stated that one of his most rewarding successes in conservation was the publishing of his book, and the fact that the publication and the free use of the illustrations have helped many other bird conservation initiatives throughout the Caribbean and the region, including the previous poster, this new poster, bird ID cards that we do have. I think we still have some that we did get from Birds Caribbean as well, and we do distribute at schools when we get the chance. And interpretive signs, which is something that we also would like to embark on. We already started and had a little delay in the planning of some signs for some of our public spaces. So after this, that will be something else on the agenda. And the creation of local bird guides throughout the region here in Jamaica and the Caribbean. And without further ado, I welcome Mr. Herb Raphael.
Yes, hello. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, Damany and Birdlife. Hello?
Sorry, yes, sir, we're hearing you.
Okay. Well, thank you, Damany, and it's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm sorry I'm not there in person, and I'm sorry I missed 20 years ago when the first poster came out. To me, as you mentioned, posters like this are just incredibly important because they influence how people view the nature around them. And, you know, Leo Douglas, one of your members, you know, has done research on issues of how do people know the birds of their island, and most people have no idea that that there are 31 species of endemic birds in Jamaica. From a discussion I had with him, he indicated that most people know the Dr. Bird, and that's about it. And that's not unusual. That is very, very typical. I was in Africa one time at a gorilla reserve and speaking to a local person, and what it is like to have gorillas in your neighborhood. And he said, well, gee, doesn't everybody in the world have to deal with this problem? People are just not aware that the things around them are any different than the things around people in other parts of the world. With that, I do want to say a few words. The poster is very special. I'll talk a little bit about it. I do want to say a few words about conservation. And I want to start with a story because understanding how to do conservation is not a simple thing. A former employee of mine used to work on elephants. I was just told last week is now working for a billionaire. And that billionaire is spending tons of money buying up land in Africa to conserve wildlife. And that sounds like the most idyllic job in the world. Imagine having all the money you could want to just buy up square miles of land to save elephants and lions and gorillas and so on. And while that sounds exciting and sounds like the idyllic job, my entire experience working in conservation suggests that, frankly, that is not the way to approach conservation. Owning land is something you can count, it's something you can look at, but generally it's not really the most effective way to conserve. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about that, because I believe that process, which has been a process that conservation has relied on for over 100 years, is pretty obsolete, because the world has become just too crowded, number one. And number two, when people's attitudes aren't synchronized with basically, when people's attitudes are such that they don't care strongly about the land, you have all kinds of negative consequences. So one issue is, yes, human population has grown and there's a need for space, and they tend to move up to the boundaries of protected areas. When they move up to the boundaries of protected areas, and if they don't appreciate the land, what happens? The land gets degraded. Pet animals will go into the land. Look at the Everglades in the United States. The Everglades is millions of acres of land in the United States set aside to conserve wildlife, and what's it full of? It's full of Burmese pythons, which have virtually annihilated a large number of the species that occurred in the Everglades. How did they get there? It only took one person, or maybe more than one, so that a few individuals, or a gravid female was introduced there, and it's caused havoc and completely changed an area that millions of dollars have been spent to try to restore. So you have the growing human population, the potential degradation, because when you buy huge amounts of land, it's practically impossible to build fences around them. And even if you build fences, those fences can't keep everything out. Another thing is that very often some big national need arises. In Tanzania, they wanted to build a road through the Serengeti. In Nicaragua, they've been talking about building a canal to improve upon the Panama Canal. And when national needs arise, any land, no matter what land, will be taken for the use that politicians decide are more important. The other thing about buying land is the more attention you put into buying land, generally, you aren't necessarily promoting political support. And political support is absolutely essential for conservation. You cannot simply buy land in a vacuum without building the political support it needs to, and not only political support, but as I say, the cultural support to conserve it. It sort of ignores the realities of the world that we're living in today. An example of that, another example of that, is if you take Yellowstone today. Yellowstone was a park set aside. It's the most prestigious park in the United States. It was set aside in the 1880s when nobody lived out there other than indigenous peoples. When American bison leave Yellowstone National Park, which is a refuge, they're immediately slaughtered because ranchers don't like them mingling with their cattle and are afraid they'll cause a disease. When wolves leave Yellowstone, they're immediately slaughtered because ranchers don't like them or they're shot for fun. So setting aside a reserve or a piece of land to protect animals, and anytime the animals leave, they're going to get shot, that is hardly an effective way to conserve the wildlife of a country. On top of that, you have climate change. And when you set aside land to protect something, historically, like for example, in the agency I worked in, the Fish and Wildlife Service, when we set aside land, the Fish and Wildlife Service, the presumption was that we can manage it in a way, and we spend a lot of money managing it, we can manage it in a way that is going to sustain the wildlife there, whether it's waterfowl or whether it's endangered species or whatever. Climate change says, no, you're not going to manage the land the way you want to, because the climate is changing so drastically in many places that you simply don't have the kind of control that that we used to have. You don't have the access to water that there used to be. There might be more forest fires. There might be more drought. There might be this, there might be that. And so because events of that nature occur more frequently, managing land becomes much, much more complicated, if practical at all. And so it becomes a less sound approach to doing conservation work. So that said, I wanted to touch on that because it basically has been sort of the main feature of wildlife or conservation for over 100 years is land acquisition. And I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about that and how we need to get past that and move on to other strategies. And with that, turning again to the poster, as you indicated, the poster is to enlighten everyone. It's obviously most valuable to influence young children. And going to the schools, as Damany suggested, is certainly the ideal way to get young people to appreciate that, gee, we have 31 species of animals in our backyard, in our country, that are found no place else in the world. And that's a very amazing, amazing thing. Why? Because the United States doesn't have 31 birds in it that are found no place else in the world. I'm not sure how many there are, but I don't believe there are 31. So that Jamaica has that, and the United States, a country so much larger, does not, is just fascinating. So it's a very special attribute, and featuring it in the poster is a very powerful way to bring that home to the local people. And that ultimately is what conservation is all about. It's about what people think. It's about culture. And in that regard, Damany, you mentioned that the art from the books that I've done has been used for things like the poster and so on. And frankly, I believe that has more impact on conserving birds than the books do. And the reason is because it's targeted more directly towards youth and children, and something that they can use. Just like a project, another project that the Cape Cod Bird Club has recently funded or supported is the translation of a small bird book, coloring book of endemic birds of the West Indies for young children. The coloring book reaches children when they're in more formative years, and that's the time you want to try to interest them in conservation. So I would say, I wouldn't be surprised, probably 50 to 100 projects now have been done using the art from the book, and I couldn't be more proud and more excited, and I hope there are 50 or 100 more, because that ultimately will determine what people think and believe about birds and have a huge impact in the Caribbean. That includes t-shirts used for markers on nature trails, making posters. I'm very excited about all the uses of the art, and I hope it continues on for years to come. So let me turn then to the issue of what, in fact, specifically might we do, might a group like Birdlife Jamaica do to have the most effective impact on conservation. I'll start with a story, because years ago I worked in Puerto Rico. For 7 years, I spent 7 years in Puerto Rico, most of which I worked for the Department of Natural Resources. And at that time, I did bird surveys. My agency did marine surveys. We did all kinds of surveys and studies of wildlife. This goes way back before most of you were born, in the 70s. And we had worked for many, many years and collected tons and tons of information about the bird life of Puerto Rico. And a colleague of mine and I went to one of the assistant secretaries and said, hey, we spent years collecting all of this information and we have it in our files, except how it needs to reach the people. And what do you say we have a meeting with the Department of Education and indicate to them all the information that we have about not just the birds and other wildlife, but about the reefs, about the mangroves, about everything, all the natural history of Puerto Rico. What do you say we have a meeting with them to explain what we have and how it might be used by them for future materials for the schools? And I'll never forget the assistant secretary turned to us and basically said, why would we do something like that? Why would we do that? Your job is to collect data. It is not to write books for kids. Go back to your job. But if you want a recommendation to work in the Department of Education, I'll write one for you. And so we never met with the Department of Education. They never received our materials. They're still sitting in the files. Well, I shouldn't say they're still sitting in the files. They sat in the files for certainly the time that I worked there. Hopefully that has all changed. But that's exactly how not to do conservation. We spend a lot of time and effort collecting information, enjoying the study of wildlife, but never converting it into something that would engage the public and get them to appreciate wildlife. So what might be done that's different? Well, the Caribbean is really an excellent example of some of the better things that have been done. And you in Jamaica, you've had one of those things is the Pride campaigns that were run by RARE and begun by Paul Butler, just an amazing, amazing person. I believe you had one Pride campaign over your butterfly, the largest butterfly in the world. But Pride campaigns were first begun in St. Lucia, expanded through the Lesser Antilles, and now being done all over the world in a rather different form, but basically the same thing that Jamaica was done in Jamaica. Why are Pride campaigns so special? Because they are focused on reaching a broad spectrum of society, focused on reaching young children, and focused on a key element of what our culture is, and that is the pride we take in who we are and the island or the country that we are part of. Another fascinating and great program that evolved out of the Caribbean are radio soap operas, also begun in St. Lucia and used for influencing attitudes in over and again, not just conservation issues, but a whole array of issues, because people sympathize with the key characters in soap operas, and those individuals set a norm that people then follow. And the radio soap operas that began in the Lesser Antilles have also been used in other parts of the world and have had a huge impact in different places regarding different issues. That said, I'll break down specifically some of the key things that I think we need to think about, and I would certainly think about if I were starting my career in building a conservation initiative in Jamaica or any place else. And how is that done? I think what I believe is most successful is to look at society as sectors. All of society, every society has different sectors. The teachers, the politicians, people at the military, you name it. There are all kinds of sectors, and the government. And you can break those down into subsections, and all types of institutions. And so you look at those and you prioritize them in terms of those that it is important to influence. In the case of this poster, as you've indicated, Damany, this focus is on young children, because young children can be very much influenced, and you customize your initiative to reach those sectors. We very quickly, I'll give you one very quick example. We developed a program years ago when I was with the Fish and Wildlife Service to focus on decision makers in Mexico because they were not being reached. And before our initiative even began, the president of Mexico invited the organizers of the initiatives into his office and canceled a project that was worth tens of millions, if not $1 billion, because he was concerned that the decision makers that were going to participate in this particular training program might develop a bad attitude toward this particular project. It was a major industrial development project in Baja California. And so by focusing on decision makers, a key constituency within society, a key stakeholder group, we were able to have an impact without even launching the initiative at the time. It hadn't even been officially launched yet. So the key thing is identifying stakeholder groups. The second thing is customizing initiatives to reach each stakeholder group. You don't reach decision makers the same way you reach young children. In the case of the Mexican decision makers, we were concerned that they would say, oh, I'm busy, I have to leave. The workshop that we were going to have them attend for 5 days was going to be on a boat, so they couldn't go anywhere. So that's customizing the initiative to reach your constituency. The next important thing is reflecting on, well, what are the values of that constituency or that, say, stakeholder group with regard to the natural world? What is it that they believe in? What is it they don't believe in? You know, and you need to know that in order to be able to build on it and hopefully improve it for the better. So one thing is having a set of values. What is a group's values? Is the particular sector's values? The next thing is to convert those values into behaviors. Values are one thing. Behaving in a way that reflects those values is something else. And there's all kinds of material that shows that our values aren't always reflected in our behavior. So identifying what behaviors, positive behaviors, can be promoted that reflect the values of the stakeholder group are of fundamental importance. The next element of a successful conservation program is indicators. Okay, we've identified what behaviors need to change. How are we going to change them, and let's develop some indicators that show that we've succeeded. Because if you don't develop some indicators to show success and measure those before and after, it's hard to show that you've had that your initiative has been successful. And then finally, no group, or very few, if any, groups have an ideal set of conservation values. And so the next challenge, of course, is say, okay, we've identified these conservation values, we've promoted behaviors that are going to help implement them effectively. How can we build on them? What's missing? You know, are there other things that we could do that could make our values stronger, our society's values stronger, our stakeholder groups' values stronger? And it's an iterative process, and you keep building on them to make them stronger and stronger. That everything I've said has to do with working with people. Nothing I've said in terms of solution to conservation is talked about owning land. And that's why when I started by talking about setting aside land in Africa, it's not the solution. Setting aside land in Jamaica is not the solution either. Having a populace that appreciates and takes pride in the natural world of Jamaica, that's the solution. And when you have a population that does that, it will protect the land virtually naturally. It will want the land protected without some billionaire coming and buying it up. It will want the land protected in a way that someone will not come with foreign snakes and release them and cause havoc. It will protect the land in all the ways that you would really like to see it protected, not just within the protected area boundary, but in the land outside those boundaries. So it's a much more challenging process. Finding some billionaire to buy land is great, and working with people who have little or no appreciation is very challenging. But hey, that's what conservation is all about. It took me a long time to sort of put my finger on the real specifics of the challenge, but I can tell you very frankly, that's certainly what I found to be the case. I could give you many, many examples, but we don't have the time. But I appreciate the time to spend, to have a chance to chat with you for a minute or say a few words on behalf of the Cape Cod Bird Club and formerly the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. We're very proud to be able to work with Birdlife Jamaica on making this post a reality. And I wish you the greatest success in the future for its distribution and ultimately poster number 3. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Herb, for that lovely talk, and many things to consider and carry forward in how we all think about conservation. And now we're excited to release our new Endemic Birds of Jamaica poster. So you see our new poster. I hope everyone is putting in their orders. We had the opportunity to deliver a few to some key stakeholders. There are more deliveries to be made, and we encourage persons, once they do get their posters in hand, feel free to share your new poster on social media, of course, using the hashtag Birdlife Jamaica and FIWI31. And I'm now going to invite Damian to share some photos of the presentations that were previously made.
Good day, everybody. For 1 minute, I never know I was muted. But yes, I get the fun part of today's presentation where we gave some posters to some members. This included schools and also government institution, and also some of the, what I should say, institution that assisted us in funding the last, making the first poster. So we start off here. We have at Denham Town, where we have Miss Shanique Hamilton, which is a senior teacher there. She's intrigued in the environment, and she was so happy to get this lovely poster. And she wanted to be shared with a number of classes. So she wants every class to get a poster. So that is going to be an endeavor, but you know, we start here with a lovely poster, and we know with the help of members and well-wishers that we will be able to get posters to most of the schools in Jamaica. And then we went down to Charles Smith High School, where the vice principal, Miss Ellen Austin, as you can see there, posing with her picture. She enjoyed it, and I should say that was very good. And then we move on now to Jamaica Environmental Trust, a voice for Jamaica natural resources. And here we had Dr. Teresa Rodriguez Moody, the new CEO that we give good well wish for her new job as running a very interesting institution that plays an important role in protecting our environment. And as you can see, our president there smiling, handing over the poster, and you can see that it's framed. So that's pretty good. Now we move on to Department of Life Sciences, and there is a head of department, Dr. Dwight Robinson. The University of the West Indies have played a part in doing a lot of research in terms of bird, and we honor people like Dr. Peter Vogel, who played a part in research, and we also had members like Catherine Levy, who was also from the Department of Life Sciences, one of our past president of Birdlife Jamaica, who is integral in the first poster, and I hope he's in the meeting now. So that was Dr. Robinson. We move on now to another member who was part of the Department of Life Sciences, but now he's the chief conservator of the Forestry Department, or the CEO, and that is Mr. Ainsley Henry. And there he received his poster from our past president, Ricardo Miller. And you see there posting, he was very happy to receive it. I hope when I go to the boardroom in forestry, we can see that poster, and I hope they will ask for more posters about the birds. And we move on to the RGR Greener Communication Group, where we gave the poster to no other than Mr. Gary Allen, who surprisingly is a birder. He's from St. Mary, and he was so happy to get this poster. And he said that after receiving this poster, he wanted 10 to give some to his kids. And then he said that he wanted to donate some to some school in the parish of St. Mary. So now it moved up to 20, and now it might be up to 30. And his secretary was also so happy that she wanted about 3 for her kids. So this is pretty good. We move on now to the Urban Development Corporation, where we gave the poster to the head, which is Miss Heather Pinnock. Urban Development Corporation do a lot of development in Jamaica. And one of their tagline is making development happen, but also to make development sustainable. So it was a good thing to give that to Miss Heather Pinnock. And as you can see, she was very happy to receive it. We move on now to the Institute of Jamaica, where we have the lovely Miss Tracy Kamak, which is the director of the Natural History Museum of Jamaica, which is a part of the IOJ. Please note that the museum have some of the archives of the birding activities that we have done in Jamaica. They have from Goss, the first book. They have the Birdlife Jamaica broadsheets, which have about 50 years of records of birding through the island. So this is IOJ, is a repository of information on birds and also information on Birdlife Jamaica. There are also some people I would like to big up who never got the chance here. We had JCDT, who was given a poster, but they didn't have a time to send in the picture. And also, interesting thing that happened when we were given the poster, one of the other board member, Louise and I was in a parking lot, And then there was a member from the diaspora, a teacher from over the US, Miss Trace Stacey Strout, who might be pretty shy now, but we're giving her a shout out. She saw us looking at a poster and was so overwhelmed on how it looked and just donated $100 and said that she wanted the poster to go to a few schools in her parish in St. James. So initiatives like this is what help in providing information about birds, because you know a lot of Jamaicans are not aware of our Free Bird 31 endemic, which is a big deal. And I hope you guys appreciate the little handing over. Please, maybe some groups might be here that how comes Birdlife member never carry any poster to them. We had limited time to deal with, plus we have limited amount of posters printed that are framed. So after this, we will provide a poster, and I know our president will give you all the information about that. Thanks to all, well, I should say the agency, everybody who played a role. And this is a list here from school to JET, to the university, to forestry department, to RGR communication group, to Urban Development Corporation, which made development happen. And last but closing, to IOJ, which play a big part in the repository of information on birds in Jamaica. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Damien. Trying to keep things a little tight because of time, but does anyone have, if anyone has questions for us or for Herb, you can, let me see if I see some, are there any here? I'm not sure where the questions are, but oh, sorry, I'm seeing that. Is there a written plan for how the posters will be used and impacts being measured? Not at the moment. I know that some of Leah's previous work was specifically targeted, not necessarily at the posters, but at introducing birds to children at a certain age and then following up with the same children to see how it has steered their life choices, career, appreciation, other things like that. We hadn't set out any KPIs or anything to measure exactly the impact. But the main thing first is to get them out there. So I'm a big proponent on, and I know many of us are, on having the information there. So it's important to get the information out first, and then afterwards trying, if you want to say exactly how it's been impacted, you can always do that. But there, if you definitely don't want the information out there, you don't put it out there. But I want to remind people that the posters will be, the distribution, actual distribution will start on September 1st. And there's something else. Oh, we are going to put in the chat reminding members and persons who would like to become members, and for sharing with persons who know persons who may be interested. We created a Google Docs form. Thanks to Keisha for setting that up. And it's, along with that, it's a renewal form. So we are reminding members to pay their dues. It's an extremely affordable club. These dues help with the organizing of various events like this, and we contribute to other NGOs that are helping with birding, and it will help with the poster distribution and all these things. It's in the chat now. And we would also like to shout out persons in that are attending. I just made aware we have a number of persons who were in the photos a while ago receiving posters. Other persons from Birds Caribbean, the current president is there. Adrian Tosas. Thank you for joining. And we also would like to share another form, and we're trying to find persons in the membership that have different skills that would like to volunteer or contribute to helping the club. So there's a form that's now in the chat, and that is from, you know, support for board related activities, not bird, board, pardon my accent, such as, you know, legal things, accounting, helping with editing, and going forward with the broadsheet in this new digital world. As John had mentioned in the video, Vaughn Turlan for many years was carrying the broadsheet on his back and was doing an excellent job in collating this data, which is very, very key for ongoing and future research. And other things like digital media, social media, events, photography, membership activities, education volunteers, networking, especially to get out the poster. So the survey link is there. And oh, I'm just seeing that the chat. Okay, we're trying to fix that. But seeing some questions now. There's a question for Herb from Emma. What strategies could be used to reach out to Jamaican communities, especially rural, via the poster? And what do you consider the most important target audiences apart from children and young people? So Herb, you heard that? You can answer.
Sure, I'd be glad to. Very quickly, I think a critical target audience we don't pay enough attention to are decision makers at different levels of communities. The non-environmental people. So that's the answer to that question. As far as reaching rural communities, I think the best way is to engage a few key people in those communities and work with them to come up with the strategy. I don't think it's something I can suggest. It's more get a few key people from the community together and say, how do we reach your community? And the more they are part of the process in doing that, the more successful the initiative will be.
Thank you, Herb. And I agree, having more hands on the ground, and many hands make light work, more persons as nexus points for distribution, and especially persons who understand their community. Someone asked if there were digital versions. They can, you can send an email to Birdlife Jamaica at Gmail, and we will sort that out. We will soon be posting the new poster on social media as well. So you'll have it there to look at in that version. But I suppose if persons wanted a more true, high-res copy, we can sort that out. And we'll be in touch. As I mentioned, the social media, it's the same thing on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, which is Birdlife Jamaica. So you can search in that. Yes, someone asked if we're still going to hand over to various key members in government. That's the plan. So this is this is the launch, but then we're going to continue handing over part from the schools. And it's reminding everyone that for the schools, it's all free. None of the schools will be paying for any posters. All of the proceeds from individuals and other organizations will go into distributing these free to schools. But I'm being prompted, yes, that we are very short on time. So I'm going to extend thanks to Herb again for all of his previous work, his books, and the use, allowing us and others to use these lovely illustrations for posters and going forward, maybe soon signs and other things. Cape Cod Bird Club, Birds Caribbean, all our members, all of our government bodies, NEPA, Forestry, IOJ, the Natural History Museum, UA, UDC, the NGOs, JED, CCAM, JCDT, and thank you very much. And I think we'd have a little bit of time for any other questions. If not, feel free to communicate with us on via email and via social media, and we will all stay in touch. And thank you again, everyone, for participating. So it's lovely. And we will have, keep everyone updated with how the distribution goes. Thank you again, and have a good rest of your Sunday.